borrowed time, the clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Living Off Borrowed Time podcast. I am your host, Patrique, on RYM, Patrick McGovern, government name. Joined as always by my co-host, Caleb, OptimalAudio on RYM. And this week we will be covering, it's about the exact midpoint of the year, it seems like. So it seems like as good a time as any to talk about the musical highlights and the few lowlights of the year, because in a weird reversal of how things have gone to just about literally everything else, there's been a ton of musical highlights and very few lowlights. So, plenty to discuss. Two things I want to talk about at the beginning of the show. First of all, had we had more of a listener base, they probably would have done a lot of complaining about how bad my audio quality has been. And that is because I'm an old man house phone, and I was using a 5-year-old iPad to record the audio for these podcasts up until now. Until our former producer pointed out to me that maybe I should be using my more current iPhone to record the audio for this like an actual adult. So now, brought to you in crystal clear iPhone 10 audio. Hopefully, you'll be able to hear me without dropping out or distortion or anything other than the usual ambient sounds of me making food, getting up, going to the bathroom, that are just part of the things that you listen to podcasts for. But aside from that, there shouldn't be any sort of technological problems with the audio. So I apologize for the shitty audio in the past. This should be a noted improvement. Hopefully this makes your listening experience a little better. Secondly, I would like to, so in my experience, successful podcasts have weekly segments. Knowledge Fight, one of my favorites, has the Year of the Seltzer, where Dan, for over the course of a year, tries to go through 500 seltzers. Well, a certain artist has more releases than there are seltzers in that year. And that would be one Mr. Charles Eddie Lee Hamilton Jr., and my goal for this year, Dan has the Year of the Seltzer, I have the Year of the Hamilton. Starting today, and this has nothing to do, this is my attempt to give back, because I feel that Charles Hamilton, in addition to just being forgotten in general because of, he hasn't done his career any favors and he oversaturated the market, this man's SEO had to have gotten completely fucked by that stupid musical. I don't think you can Google Charles Hamilton and not get anything that's not about the fucking musical. So, in order to do my part, for every episode from here on out, barring potential special episodes that are artist discographies maybe, but for the most part, I'm going to try and cover at least one Charles Hamilton album for the course of this next year in hopes of getting through his over 500 albums. Now, this is a big task, and he hasn't made it very easy. Although he has released most of his albums for free online, the folder that they're in is not organized chronologically. It's organized by alphabetically. So I'm kind of feeling my way out, just going through it alphabetically. I've heard some, not all, not far from all, otherwise this will be a pointless project. The ones I have heard, I will revisit fresh. You're welcome to listen to any of them if any of them, seem interesting to you, Caleb. Although I can understand if they don't. Maybe I'll talk you into being a fan. Maybe I won't. But we're going to start the project this week with the first thing that I was able to download off the page, which I don't know if I'm free to give out this link. Charles, if you're listening, let me know if I'm free to share the link, because I'm pretty sure you're the one who compiled it in the first place. But we're going to start with 4 Whore Street / Stanley Ipkiss, which is a very striking title. Stanley Ipkiss is the name of the bank teller from The Mask, the main character from the Jim Carrey film The Mask, which is going to start a long trend with Charles of just nerdy-ass references that have pretty much nothing to do with the music. Although, given the approach of this album, it seems like maybe he's putting on a mask, and what he's putting on a mask to do is yell about women. Another theme you're going to learn with Charles Hamilton. Has issues with women. Lots of them. And potentially all imaginary women, or possibly just women that are characters from Sonic games. And I don't know if they're actually counted women. He really has a thing for Amy Rose, which I think is like a female hedgehog. I don't know. But regardless, this is... I don't know if this was the best place to start. It's a good place to start in that it covers a lot of his pet topics, and he raps well on it. It's a good place to start also that it covers a lot of his things that are going to be problems that recur throughout him, like low recording quality and just difficult subject matter and lack of song structure. I would not recommend this as anyone's actual starting point. The only reason I started with it is because it was the first thing alphabetically. That said, it's kind of ahead of its time in terms of just doing stuff. It came out in 2012, according to how it was tagged. These things might all be tagged 2012, by the way. Another thing I've learned in following Charles Hamilton is you can't really trust how these things are tagged. Like, he might have tagged everything 2012 because in his mind the world is always ending, and that's his idea of a joke. The most interesting song on here is track 2, which is called Daughterful, which I think was intended as a response to Nas's Daughters at the time. Comes across a little closer to Kanye's Violent Crimes as interpreted by Wesley Willis. It goes on for about 5 minutes, and it's just an interesting exploration of his psyche. Generally, that's what this album is. It's more of an exploration of his psyche than it is anything resembling a conventional rap record, which I guess makes it a good entry point for this project. So now how to grade these? In keeping with something that Charles would appreciate, I'm going to give them one. Every release will be ranked 1 out of 10 Chaos Emeralds, which is what Sonic searches for in his games. I'm going to give it a solid 5 out of 10 Chaos Emeralds because it's distinctly right in the middle of your experimental Charles Hamilton. It's probably not something that I would reach for repeatedly, but if once you're pretty far down the rabbit hole, you find stuff to enjoy in his personality. You'll find something to enjoy in the idiosyncrasies of this album. The production's really interesting. It kind of plays to the strengths of his lo-fi aesthetic. And lyrically, once you get it comes across on its face being a little off-puttingly misogynist. But with Charles, there's always an aspect where he's turning it on himself. Like, these are not unself-critical things he's saying. It's not just him being like, oh, fuck you bitches. Like, he might start out that way, but there's always a little more subtext to it. That said, it's still not a really super pleasant listen. And again, it's not something I see myself reaching for more than once or twice. But again, I said solidly in the middle of the experimental Hamiltonization experience, as he likes to call it. So we're starting down this road. 1 down, 540 or so to go. Let's see if I can do it in 365 days.
I for one, am looking forward to how many Chaos Emeralds you'll collect.
Gotta collect them all. I was wondering whether to do it out of 10 Chaos Emeralds or 100 gold rings. So I decided on the Chaos Emeralds, and we'll see how long I stick with this project. So this is a blatant attempt to get his attention, because I feel like out of any rapper that's going to pay attention to this podcast, I mean, I have my suspicions about one already. I'm not going to air it out. That might have already paid attention to it, but I feel like if anybody else would, it's probably Charles Hamilton. So Chuck, if you're listening, let me know what you think about the fishing levels in Sonic Adventure. I thought they were a pain in the ass. So we've started the Hamiltonization process 2020. So moving on, speaking of 2020, there was a lot of music this year. I think we have a lot of feelings about it, and let's start talking about it. What do you got?
Well, you want to talk about the very few bad things?
Well, yeah, we talk about okay. So what was the most disappointing thing? Because I can't really, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that really disappointed me. So maybe you can refresh my memory on that.
Yeah, I'm thinking right now. I know I've been going through this, just like what I've listened to this year and what I've rated. We disagree on that like random Sufjan project. I was like on it. I know you liked it a lot.
Yeah, I would say that I liked it a lot, but I completely understand people's feelings on it. To me, it's something along the lines of Tangerine Reef, that Animal Collective album, where there aren't songs there so much, but it's more of a textural piece. And I feel like it plays off stuff he's done in the past, like the Rabbit albums and BQE. I think it's way better than BQE, which I thought was kind of wanky. Like, look at me, I can do avant-garde modern classical, which he actually proved he could all the way back with Enjoy Your Rabbit. But I feel like it was a little too, it didn't go far enough for the people that wanted avant-garde, but it also wasn't Sufjan enough for people who wanted Sufjan, if that makes sense. Like, there were enough songs with vocals that hinted at it being more of a traditional Sufjan album that kind of misdirected. So when people heard the whole thing, it was going to be unsatisfying for both camps. But for me, it felt like a rare case where the compromise worked. Like, I was able to see it taking the positives from both ends as opposed to being a watered down version of either.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see where you would think it would be not enough of either or too much of one side diluting the other?
I think, yeah, I don't know. It seemed a little meandering to me. I think a record that we both would say is disappointing was the Tiana Taylor record, which was entirely too long. And was not the proper follow up to KTSE that I think most fans wanted.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that was really great about KTSE that I think we covered in when we were doing the Wyoming sessions was that its brevity, like all the Wyoming sessions albums, was really thrilling. And this is the polar opposite of that. And it's like she took editing lessons from Gina Aiko.
Right.
Like there are quality songs on here. There's maybe even a really quality album on here, a quality 40-minute album. This album's over 90 minutes. The fuck? Like, and the best song on here is probably We Got Love, which is a KTSE song that they just, Lauryn Hill just waited forever, probably for a bigger paycheck, if I had to guess. Or just to be difficult, because, Lauryn Hill. So, but yeah, I can't really remember any songs off the top of my head that aren't We Got Love that are great off this. And it was a disappointing follow-up. It kind of dropped without really any buzz, and no one's talking about it now. It's not actively bad, but it's exhausting, and it doesn't... Yeah, considering how good KTSE was, it felt very underwhelming.
Yeah, I don't think it needed to exist, at least in its form. I think a big disappointment for a lot of people. I mean, I know you were never a fan of the guy, but the Car Seat Headdress record was not good. And that was a record that we kind of touched on it in the episode with Trout, but that was not a good record, and has some of his worst songs on it. The Diplo, we touched on that enough. We don't need to.
How can that be disappointing? I mean, it's almost not disappointing.
I was talking about
just
bad.
Horrible, yeah. I think it's objectively the worst thing released all year. That just on general principle has to be the worst thing released all year. Fuck that album. Just craven capitalist garbage. Fuck Diplo. Nothing good will ever come out. I mean, the only good thing that comes out of that is I don't think any of the songs have actually broken big. So I feel like this whole craven attempt to swag Dracula Lil Nas X was a failure. That's a lane that only he could ride, unless you're like actively in the country lane and just kind of doing rap country shit. Like, I don't think it goes both ways. I don't think that at this point you can be in the rap lane and try and do like the ironic country shit unless you're Lil Nas X.
Right, and
even then, it's kind of I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just like, even then, like, Lil Nas X, like, that's his lane. Like, so I don't think when he does that, I don't get the sense of like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Like, I don't, that, like, I'm in on the joke sort of thing. I feel like he is still pretty earnest about it, and like what he does versus Diplo is just the complete opposite. There's a lot of, there have been some trash records this year. I think I don't think you've heard this, and I don't encourage it. I think we've finally gotten our sequel to Supermarket. And I think it comes in the form of the G-Eazy album that was released recently.
Ooh, no, I haven't, and I'm not going to. But
which is
did
one
G-Eazy
of...
make an indie pop album?
G-Eazy made a, with a lot of air quotes here, singer-songwriter, indie pop, emo rap, alt R&B fusion album.
That sounds atrocious on so many levels. Like,
the
thing about Supermarket, and again, that episode's lost to time, which is a shame, but it was mostly just boring. Like, the thing was, it was infuriating when he would actively steal from people, but I remember, like, when we first turned it on, I was expecting to be bowled over by how terrible it was, but then it starts off with, like, that 6-minute song where it's just like, oh, he's ripping off Phoenix. Like, he's a bad Phoenix cover band for 7 minutes. Yeah. And it was, like, not infuriating. Supermarket didn't get infuriating until the Chili Peppers Biting, where he does the Rick Sanchez Get Swifty line, where it's just like, oh, go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself forever. And then he steals from Just a Friend, or it's just like, no, seriously, go fuck yourself forever.
Right.
But like, those are the two moments that really made me mad. And the thing about Logic is when he gets to that level, there's even like that certain level of like overt over sincerity to him, where it's just like you almost, people who aren't us might feel bad for making fun of him because he's being so sincere, man. I don't get that out of G-Eazy. G-Eazy's just like so cynical. Like, so I can't see G-Eazy pulling that off and being like boring. I get to see G-Eazy's like, you can enlighten me on this because you actually suffered through it, but I could just see G-Eazy doing this being way more infuriating than Supermarket.
No, to me it was easily the worst G-Eazy record, which I didn't even think was possible. Because G-Eazy was just like boring, terrible. You know what I mean? Like it was just. I mean, I think G-Eazy's had like one song in his career that I thought was like okay, and the rest I absolutely could never get into the G-Eazy hype. At least from a popularity perspective, you know, I didn't understand it. But this was just like it's also mean spirited because I'm pretty sure. I mean, he dated Halsey for a while, I think. And there's a song on there that is a big time like fuck you breakup type of song, and it's really mean and like nasty, and I'm pretty sure it's directed at her.
I mean, I have no love for Halsey, but it's just like,
Yeah.
if anybody's gonna make me feel sympathy for Halsey, it's G-Eazy. It's like,
G-Eazy.
you don't need to. I feel the same way that I do about like Big Sean doing this type of shit. It's like, save it for your fucking text messages or when you're drinking with your boys. Like, you don't need to like do this shit in a song, a pop song. It's really ugly. And Big Sean got away with it on I Don't Fuck With You because he had a Mustard beat and an E40 feature and Kanye around. And like that made people think that it like that was enough. The sheer force of all those elements made it a good song, good-ish song. Again, I only really fuck with the second half of his last verse on that. I feel like otherwise it's just, again, it's like a drunk dial. Like, I didn't fuck with Marvin's Room either. People think that's a masterpiece, but it's just like, these songs are all very unappealing to me. And maybe it is misandrist, and I will never ever say that word on this podcast again, because fuck that word. But because I don't mind when women write breakup songs like that necessarily, but when I hear like some male rapper dude do it, like, and it's like exclusively male rapper dudes too, because I feel like if you're like if Frank Ocean did this, he could probably pull it off.
It would be a lot more.
G-Eazy is not Frank Ocean.
G-Eazy listening to Blonde and trying to recreate it. That's what he's doing. Oh my god, I do.
G-Eazy doing a cover of Nights.
G-Eazy definitely listened to fucking Self-Control and was like, "Yep, I can do this." Oh man,
G-Eazy shouldn't listen to Self-Control. G-Eazy should use some self-control and not put out this fucking album. Yeah.
Yes, got him.
Right.
Yeah, so that was terrible. I mean, we went through some of the stuff already at the earlier point. You know, the Eminem, the Green Day, all, you know what I mean, like the really terrible shit.
Something I expected to be horrible that wasn't, amazingly, speaking of Eminem, and you know, holy shit, mark it on your calendars. I'm saying something nice about 2020 Eminem. Doing a song with, of all people, Kid Cudi. Not a bad song. Not a bad Eminem verse. Can't believe I'm saying it. Because he's doing a lot of the same shit that he normally does with the labored punchlines and whatever, but he's trying, like, he goes out of his way during the song for like the first 8-10 bars, because he still does the same thing where he goes on for way too long, but for the first 8 or 10 bars, he makes a bunch of corny jokes about how he's not smoking weed, so just in case you were afraid he was smoking weed, because he's doing the Cudi Stone flow, but doing that flow makes him a lot more palatable. And because he's not yelling, he's not doing all of this over-animated cartoon character shit.
Mm-hmm.
And some of his punchlines are actually halfway clever without really forcing it. Like, there's one thing where he does, like, a floor-eyed swish, and the lyric video actually, like, flips to show you the wordplay. It's like, okay, we didn't need that. But that's the closest thing to a dumb dad joke in here. He has a really clever line about, like, why you should wear a fucking mask. He has, like, a nice little memorial line for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, which is, like, he doesn't, like, if you've heard Eminem try and get, like, woke before, he spent 10 minutes about how he wanted to drop a coffee pot on Donald Trump's head, and then he did that Untouchable song about police brutality, where it's like, I agree with your points, your song is unlistenable. He keeps it, like, one, like, 2 bars about police brutality and puts the song, ends it on that button, or ends his verse on that button, and then does a little Cudi outro. And it's like, this is so much better than it has any right to be. Like, I don't know if I need a whole album of it, but for a little one-off thing, I mean, obviously I would want Kids See Ghosts too, but I could see that, you know, obligatory Kanye section. You can throw it up on the fucking screen, get and puke if you want. I feel like maybe that was something that was promised to Cudi because Kanye's made noise about it, but then Kanye did a million other Kanye things, and Cudi's like, all right, fine, I'm going to go work with somebody else. Like, I got all these shit written, might as well go do it with somebody else. Did not think that somebody else was going to be Eminem, and did not expect the song to be any good. But I originally rated it at a 2.5, and it went up to a 3.5 because I actually listened to it more than once, which I can't say that I've done voluntarily for any Eminem song in quite a while.
Yeah, I have not heard the song. I kind of avoided it when it came out, and then just for obvious reasons. But I will check it out, and I hope that I feel the same way as you, because I know that it's like. I know it's not supposed to. I know. I mean, the general buzz has been like that. It's been all right. I don't know. I have not. Like I said, I have not listened to it. I don't have anything to contribute, but I will listen to it. Hopefully, I feel that it is. I feel the same way as you, but we'll see.
I guess I'm of 2 minds of it on it because it's like way better than anything Eminem's done, but it's also still a step down for Cudi compared to Passion, Pain, and Demon Slay and Kids See Ghosts. Like, it's nowhere near anything on either of those projects. But so it's big step up for one, big step down for the other. Also, shout out to whoever posted the fucking fake Man on the Moon 3 cover art and news story on the Yandhi Leaks Reddit. Fuck you. You fooled me. Got my hopes up, and go to hell. Like, I actually thought we're getting Man on the Moon 3 in August, and then that's not actually happening. So,
Well, apparently there's supposed to be some Kanye album soon. I mean, you knew it when he was doing the president stuff. It was going to happen.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's Wash Us in the Blood was supposed to be the lead single for something called God's Country, and yeah,
Right.
he did the whatever. I don't really want to dignify his stunts. Like, I'll talk about the music. I think Wash Us in the Blood's a really good song. I think it's catchy. I think it's really well structured. I heard the demo beforehand, and then like hearing it fleshed out. Like, he still didn't finish his verse. Like, all the energy he puts into, like, I mean, I don't think he can really control it because he's bipolar and it just goes wherever he wants at this point. But I mean, I wish that some of that energy would have gone into like actually writing a real rap verse on that, or even finishing like his sing rap verses. But they're still more finished than the demo. I really like the Travis part. I really like the beat. Like, it was a shame that he dropped that, and then 4 days later the president shit happens, and no one cared about the song anymore. The music immediately became secondary, because that's always the story with him lately, is that the music becomes secondary to the celebrity, and people become unable to judge the music on its own merits.
Right, which is just like a common issue in general. But even, I don't know, like I was saying this yesterday. I was talking to KP yesterday, and I was just like, over the course of my life, I've been a huge Kanye fan, and that hasn't changed, obviously. But I'm just like, I think this is the first time ever I'm just like, I don't really want a Kanye album. Like, I'll take it and I'll listen to it, and assuming it's par for the course with his career, it'll probably be good. But like, I just haven't even thought about it, because to me, there's just so many cool things going on in music right now, and I don't have to listen to those cool things and then have to participate in the discourse that is as insufferable as Kanye discourse in the last like 3 years.
It's been utterly toxic since he put on the hat, arguably since Pablo, but at least it's become incredibly exhausting to have to defend him. When he does shit like the Forbes interview, I don't want to defend him. I can't defend him.
Right.
So, like, and yeah, there's just so much else out there. It's like life's too short to defend what could be a great album, what could be a mid album, what, when it comes out, when ultimately you start talking about the music, people are going to want to talk about other things anyway. So why exhaust yourself? So, but yeah,
right,
that's my feelings on the song.
I think up until Pablo, and including Pablo, when Kanye put out an album, you could almost guarantee that it was going to be one of the better things that dropped that year, no matter, before you even heard the music. And now with, his last two, it's like, I don't think many people would say either of his last two records are one of the better things that dropped
The
this year.
reception started to be. I mean, you could go all the way back to 808s, obviously. Although 808s has been retroactively elevated, and so is Yeezus. But at the time, those were not rapturously received.
True. I mean,
but they did have their defenders. Whereas Pablo, I mean, the rollout to that was the beginning of the scattered Kanye rollout / the media melt. Well, again, Yeezus was the template for the media meltdown rollout, but Yeezus was also felt way more calculated with like the art installations, the Zane Lowe interview, and he had control of that narrative. From Pablo onward, it's been both. He's lost control of his creative process and of the narrative more and more with each rollout.
Right. Exactly. And the thing with Yeezus also is, I think, unlike 808s, Yeezus was very well received critically. It just wasn't a huge like commercial. I mean, obviously. So I think lots of your average Kanye fan might not have fucked with it, but it was still held up as a great album when it came out. Pablo was a great album and a popular album. So it kind of like, Kanye just still remained a huge mainstream figure. But in his last two records, he hasn't had a hit. And I wonder if, like, music obviously hasn't passed Kanye by because KSG was a great record, Daytona. I mean, we know what he can do. Like, he's Kanye. But I just wonder if, like, in 2020, is Kanye getting hits? Like, well, and I don't mean that's a necessity, but I just think for him to continue to transcend generations and have longevity, he's going to need like a hit at some point. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I remember around, it had to have been before Pablo, because I don't remember any Pablo songs from it, so it was probably Yeezus era. He was on Seth Meyers, I guess, one of the late night shows, because Kanye always did the great late night performances, and he just did a medley. It was like 6 minutes, hit after hit after hit after hit. And then I think if he did that medley now, the most recent song you get would probably be Famous. Ghost Town deserved to be a hit, but it wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, but Pablo had. I mean, Famous was a big song. Real Friends. I don't know if it was a hit, but I mean, people know that song. Ultralight Beam. Everybody knows that song. Father Touch My Hands was a hit. Like, I mean, people. I don't know. I want to say highlights, but I'm gonna check myself on that because I'm not sure. But
I mean, Highlights feels like it should have been a hit if it wasn't. Like,
right.
But then again, the thing about Thug is I can't tell how much Thug really makes for a hit. I was always under the impression that he commercially underperformed.
The funny thing, like I said this in our episode with Travis. Thug is the most popular rapper of the last like 10 years that doesn't sell. But the thing with him is he's also been on a shit ton of hits. It's just usually not his own song. It's usually a feature, but then if you look at his own songs, like if you look at YouTube or like his numbers on that are crazy, but he doesn't get like, and his streaming numbers are good, but he doesn't get like the giant like super commercial like My Mom Knows the Song type song with him. The first time he was on a song like that was like with Post Malone, and so it's just like, his album last year had some hits on it that were really popular songs, which is good.
It was really telling to me that when the Post Malone song was on the radio and they first announced the artist or whatever for it, and I was in the car with my wife, she was like, Young Thug, that's the most generic name for a rapper I've ever heard. I'm like, you don't know Young Thug? What? You don't know Young Thug? And she's like, you do know Young Thug? And then there was probably an argument about that. Like, although I think the biggest rap related argument I ever had with my wife is when she got mad at me for I left a rap mix in the car and it had Lincoln Continental by Danny Brown on it, which if you've ever heard that is him being super ignorant over Sephiroth's theme from Final Fantasy VII. And so she actually heard that, and it's like got like lines about him like being up like in the brown hat, like him being a politician instead of the White House, he's in the brown house taking a doo-doo. And it's just really immature. And so she heard like 5 seconds. She's like, I can't believe you listened to this. It's like, is that guy like that you like, the swimming pools guy that's on the radio? And then there was a very long discussion, we'll call it, about tastes. So, but yeah, but anyway, getting back to my original point was, the Post Malone song, like that really illustrated to me that Young Thug is not a name in the least.
I mean, like I said, he's not a name in the general like Kanye West, Drake, name of like you could go up to anybody on the street and they know who that is. But I think with people under 30, Young Thug is a very popular name. Like everybody, like a lot of people who have like tangentially listened to music know who he is. Like I have friends who don't listen to you rap that nearly as much as I do, and they've heard a bunch of his songs. So because of just osmosis, you're at a party, you're this, you're that, whatever. Like, Young Thug has so many songs that are big songs, but they don't transcend like the trappings of just like in the know people who listen to like a lot of rap music. You know what I mean? Like, Pick Up the Phone was a hit.
But people think of it as a Travis song.
But people, right, and it's a weird song because it's kind of like it's a both of them song, but it's Young Thug has a big part on it, so it's like it's whatever. But like his
but
other
if you
song,
ask the average person who that song was, they say it's a Travis Scott song.
oh, absolutely. Well, because I think it was. It was. They both released it on their project, so it didn't really help matters. I wish it was just like listed as a Young Thug song or one or the other. But like Young Thug, he's got all these songs. You can go through his like the best friends and like Check and Old English and whatever, but they're big songs, but they're not like big to the average person, which like I said, it doesn't mean a song isn't a hit necessarily, but it was not like a smash. He doesn't have a lot of like smashes. But if you look at his YouTube, he'll have songs in there from 5 years ago that have like 150 million views. Like that's a hit in view count, but it's not a hit in that like you said, like your wife knows about it. You know what I mean?
Well, as his partner on Old English would say, fuck 1 million downloads. I want to. What the fuck was the line? I blew it. It was a Gibbs line about from Scottie Pippins or whatever. It's like, fuck 1 million downloads. God damn it. I thought I had something really clever.
It was
there.
something about like fuck the downloads. He wants like just the cash and stuff, something like that.
Yeah, and now I feel bad that I completely blew that because Old English was actually the first song that I really rated Thug on because I was kind of on the fence. At first, I couldn't stand him because at first I heard him on old Gucci tapes and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I did not understand. Like, this guy's not on beat. His lyrics are stupid when I could understand them. What the fuck is going on? Because I was used to like weed carriers that were just not good on Gucci projects. Shout out to Verse Simmons, who always showed up on all of them. And then eventually I grew to like most of them. Like, I grew to like Pee Wee Longway a lot. Rich Homie Quan never stopped going in until he did. But yeah, Thug eventually at first I couldn't stand him. Then he I was a real contrarian about him once he hooked up with Birdman, and because I thought because he did all that shit where I felt he was just aping Wayne, which in retrospect I feel like was partially his own fandom of Wayne and partially was just shit that I think Birdman was kind of putting him up to get at Wayne in like a passive aggressive sort of way.
Right.
Like, yeah, all right, Playboy, you want to name this album Carter 6? We can't have Carter 5. We're going to have Carter 6, Playboy. Like, that was... And then he's going to do an album full of, like, what I contend are Wayne impressions. People argue Barter 6 does not have a bunch of Wayne impressions on it. I think they're wrong. But speaking of Wayne, something I'd like to say is both a disappointment and a highlight of the year is Wayne's output, because Funeral disappointed me. But then he started to put out these little EPs, Spotify playlists with like the best shit on there and new tracks. And it's really highlighted that there was a good album in there. And the one EP he put out, Weezy Flow, with the Griselda track on it, that's like that's an EP as good as anything he's ever put out. Like, it made me appreciate Mamma Mia off of Funeral, which I didn't like at first, but it's really grown on me. Because it's just like him going nuts for 4 minutes over a really deliberately unappealing instrumental that I hated at first, much like Young Thug, but grew to appreciate, and because of its abrasive qualities, much like Young Thug. And the Griselda and Wayne track, Russian Roulette, which is does not seem like it's a pairing that would work. And once you hear the track itself, the beat is like very early 2000s Rockefeller sort of stuff, and like the Chipmunk sample. And well, it's not really a Chipmunk sample, but it's a very theatrical, slightly pitched up sample. If it's not a sample, it's something that's mixed to sound like a sample. And Wayne and Benny, like Conway is not great on it, oddly enough. We'll get to Conway's actual highlights later in the episode because he's had several. But both Wayne and especially Benny are amazing on it. And it really feels like a big time pairing. It feels like Wayne had a lot of respect for them and was going to rap as hard as possible. Yeah, and like the actual highlights from Funeral, like the Manny Fresh beat Mahogany, the title track, the intro, Wayne's World, the outro, which I didn't actually get to the first time I listened to it because the album's a million minutes long, and by the time you get to the Excitation feature, it's just like, oh, get me the fuck out of here. But the last track is one of his best too, even if he's referencing fucking Wayne, like making the dumbest possible reference with Wayne's World, and the hook is really Wayne's World party time excellent, which is like, that is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. So it's a testament to how well he raps on it, that song works as well as it does. So I've pretty much come around on Funeral, but like it's kind of sort of, to go back to kind of like a Yandi almost situation where I think that you have to kind of pick and choose from what he's put out and make your own album out of it. And you can make that great album that he didn't bother to have the editor do for him or do himself.
Right, and I think Wayne, this late career period, I think still has been fruitful, and I think has really cemented him as. I mean, he was already, a super legend, whatever, but I think he's just like further showing. I think you could talk about Eminem. Like Wayne is showing how you do late period like music. Wayne was obviously a lot more influential on a newer generation than Eminem was. Although Eminem had his influence, and it wasn't good. But Wayne, I think, because of his style and his approach to music and his own music, like I think can still make good albums, and that EP was a perfect example of that. Because Funeral was super uneven and it was long, like you said, on like freaking 90 minutes or whatever the fuck, and like you didn't need that. But if you take the bite size portion of it and the best parts of it, like it's a really good record, and Lil Wayne still has it. So I agree with you. The Benny the Butcher verse was nuts. That was crazy. Benny, like, he doesn't drop things, but like when he does, it's continuously fire. So.
Well, do you want to talk about the Griselda stuff this year? Because I know Pray for Paris would definitely turn up on your list pretty high, and mine.
Yeah, so Pray for Paris was number 10 on my Midyear list, which I just ran through again this morning in preparation for this. And Pray for Paris is, I think, the best West Side project, even though he has like 4 great tapes, I think, at least. But Pray for Paris just feels like his most complete work. And a follow-up from the Hitler Wears Hermes 7, which I thought was a great tape as well. It shortened it a little bit, and it just had the feature list. It upped the feature list, with the exception of Wale. But it upped the feature list, and it has some of the best rap songs of the year on it, for sure. I mean, I know we're both in agreement about that, like $500 Ounces, the 327 track, which has one of the best hooks, I think, on a West Side Gun song. It's my favorite Griselda project this year, but all of them have been really good. Like the Conway, what's it?
Conway, Big Ghost,
Conway, the one with Big Ghost and the one with Alchemist. Yeah, those are both great. Dead Flowers is an insane track. I've listened to a lot of Griselda this year because like they just scratch an itch. I know people are like bored with them because they do essentially almost the same thing every project. But when your lane is your lane and you can own your lane and dominate your lane, and I'm saying lane a lot, but when your lane is this good, to me it doesn't matter. Like I don't give a fuck because most artists stay in a particular lane or headspace for most of their careers. So why should I care? Griselda are making great music right now. Looking forward to what they keep doing for the rest of the year.
I mean, I feel like they've just been refining their approach and honing their craft. And sure, they're going to burn some people out, but those people were probably not going to be fans for over a long period of time regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they still have the same diehard fans they had back in 2016, and they're still picking up new fans. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like there is a danger of oversaturating the market, but I don't think the quality has gone down.
No, absolutely not.
And I think that creatively, they're definitely branching out. Like, they obviously have the stuff with Derringer's their in-house producer, but if you look at Pray for Paris, there's a real expansion of the sounds on there in terms of the producers he reaches out to. like being on like the standout track, the unofficial title track of it is Westside, Joey Badass, and Tyler. That's a very eclectic and over a beat with a hook that's not really what you would think of when you think of Griselda, when you think of Westside. It's very melodic. It's, I don't want to say poppy, but I don't think it would sound super out of place on the radio if I listened to a radio station that played rap on it. So it's not as aggressively street as a lot of Griselda material. I know like people got mad at the Tyler verse for not being anything like on any other Griselda project. I think that's to its credit. I also love that Tyler verse. Fuck you if you don't. I think the singing is great. I mean, it's not technically great, but I think it's a great way to lead into his verse. I think his lines are great on it. I maintain that you can hear a lot of Earl, like, in his like little cadence there when he does the Colonel Sanders bit. So I think that it's a better rap verse than it gets credit for. But I think that it's just, with the exception of the one misstep that I won't harp on, I think it's a testament to how well he does put together albums in terms of picking production and features that fit and variety and things that suit his sense of humor. And it is different and feels more elevated, use a word he'd probably like, because you could use it to refer to like dumb, overpriced Virgil fashion shit. But it feels more elevated, like this is the retail album. This isn't the mixtape. And the mixtapes were already a level above a lot of other people's mixtapes. But it feels like he was definitely doing something different and more designer with like the higher name features. And it just felt like he was creatively expanding without compromising in content. Like, and I think he's fucking, like, that's the thing is like you get to Allah Sent Me, which people got mad. Like, if you were a Griselda fan, you were used to that. You probably thought it was hilarious, but you're a non-fan. You think that's the most obnoxious thing ever, that the hook is the most obnoxious thing. The ad-libs are super obnoxious. And anybody who followed my reviews knows that, and I guess a similar situation to the Young Thug thing, not really, because I never hated Westside and Conway. I always liked Benny, but I didn't really hear Benny until I'd heard a lot of Westside and Conway, especially Conway showing up on people's shit all the time. And I always thought that they were very boilerplate and just not interesting. I didn't understand why they got so many features. I never found Westside's voice annoying. I don't really get that criticism, but keep in mind that I always liked Danny Brown. So maybe I just have like, I've just grown up with a tolerance for annoying rap voices.
And to also, I never understood. There were people on, just on the site who were like, hey, I mean, I like some of his bars, but why are his ad libs like whatever? And I'm like, you can't listen to a West Side Gun project and get tired of the ad libs. Like, that doesn't make any. That's like, you need the ad libs. That's like having a steering wheel on a car. Like, I'm not gonna listen to a West Side Gun project if I'm not getting the million like do ad libs. Like, it's just not gonna happen.
Such a part of the whole package.
Right.
It's just like fucking Dipset back in the day, Jim Jones. Like, it's such a part of the personality. And I mean, but I guess that's just not for everybody. And I don't feel like he's really compromised on that at all. Like, he's just managed to expand it and fit it into different nuances within the same basic sound. Like, you're right. This is an extension of Hitler 7 and the Hitler series. And I hate that I have to say Hitler so much. I should say HWH or Hermes or whatever. And I think it's kind of, get to the title that I hate so much, actually. It's also like kind of sort of a greater statement about West Side. Is like, I hated that title, that mixtape series at first. But then you think about it and it's really clever. It's a play on The Devil Wears Prada. And it's like, that's the sort of thing that they do. They take your expectations, they come up with something that you might initially on its face look stupid or just like intentionally crass, but it subverts your expectations. It's deeper than you think.
Right. And it also is a deliberate contrast between, like the lowest of the low and like something that's deemed high class. Like Hermes is high class, then you have like the low. Obviously Griselda, they came from a horrible area in Buffalo, and West Side's whole persona is to be this like high class, high fashion like guy, and that's his that's part of his content and all that stuff. But you juxtapose those bars and those like song topics with the other shit he's talking about, which is how many different ways he's going to kill you. So it's just like, and all of the just like, coke raps and everything. So it's that, it's that obvious like contrast. And I think even Pray for Paris, even the title with this, and the album cover with the severed head and all that, like, it just, he's very smart with the marketing. He's very smart.
I don't really rate a lot of Virgil's art. I think he's overrated just because he costs so much and because of his reputation. I love the cover of this album, though. I think that's fucking cool as shit and really plays to your point. I think that's a great point. And I think I'm not going to speak to the newer member of Griselda, Boldy James, right?
Yeah.
I'm not as into him. Like, I've heard some of his shit mostly for the Alchemist beats, and I know his album this year got a lot of like good press. I listened to it once and I didn't leave much of an impression on me. It was good, but it didn't leave much of an impression on me. But as far as the main members of Griselda go, there's such a balance between them. Like, they're all fundamentally coming from the same place and the same content, but you have a little more of the brash personality and the fashion bars out of West Side. Conway is like recently developed more of the social consciousness to his raps, and also just had like the harder. He seemed to be the one who dropped the most wrestling references as part of his personality, although West Side does that too, but mainly in the track titles and the sound clips. And like Conway just seemed to have the more weariness to his personality. Benny would be the biggest storyteller and also the one you would probably consider the most stereotypically quote unquote hard, like somebody like a Styles P or, you know, go back to Dipset Hell Rel or something like that, who just has the most street credibility and I guess the most technical rap ability. And they all just like balance each other out really well. And there's no, like, once you've heard a few of their tracks, there's never any mistaking who's on the track. Like, and they all contribute something different and unique. And Keisha Plum, I think, I don't know if people skip, like, I imagine if you're just like a touristy listener, I hate to say that because it makes me sound like a snob, or like a casual listener to Griselda, like, you only really heard like Pray for Paris and maybe Tana Talk. I don't know, Tana Talk 3 is pretty intense if you're not really if you only really heard Pray for Paris because it got hype, you probably would skip the Keisha Plum stuff on anything else because I feel like that's a really acquired taste. But I feel like that goes back to the contrast thing too. Her approach is like very spoken word, like the Ursula Rucker stuff on Roots albums, but then her content is so profane. And so it's again that contrast between high and low, ugly and beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your Boldy James point, I loved his record from this year. I thought he sounded great over Alchemist beats. That's a fruitful pairing that I hope continues in the future. And on the West Side record, Claiborne Kick is one of my favorite songs on the album. So he killed that verse. Although the only thing wrong with his verse is he said he eats Caesar salad with Russian dressing. I don't know what kind of psychopath does that, but outside of that, really great verse, really really great song.
Russian dressing is an affront to God and man alike. That shit. What sandwich does that go on? A Reuben? Yeah, fuck Reubens.
Reubens are pretty good though, but you don't need the Russian dressing on it.
I kind of put Russian dressing in the same disgusting bucket as like coleslaw and anything blank salad, like potato salad, all that sort of shit. Where it's just like it just tastes like a bunch of mayonnaise and or oil to me. So it's just got like Caesar salad I can fuck with, but yeah, you have to have like the actual dressing it's named after. Like you don't need
Right. It doesn't make any sense that why would you have Caesar salad with the Russian dressing? I mean, maybe it sounded good as a bar, and it did sound good as a bar, the way he closes verse. But hey, if it was just a bar, cool. But if you actually do that, Boldy, come on, like you gotta change. You gotta change behavior. What are you doing?
And fucking Claiborne Kick, that is a weird ass beat and a weird ass song. I love that song.
I love that song.
I love the distortion on, I don't even know if you want to call it a hook, but it's like the phrase that gets repeated. And it's just so, the atmosphere on it's so cool. The beat is like so off time. Like that's the sort of shit I mean when I talk about like artistic expansion. Like these are some weird songs. And the way he fucking ends the album with the fucking tap dance solo.
Oh my God. I know. I mean, I think I told you this. So one of my good friends, not a huge like experienced hip hop listener outside of like mainstream stuff, but I guess Pray for Paris had, you know, it was doing well when it dropped, and a lot of people on social media were talking about it. And he was like, "What is this like? You know, what is this album? Like, are you listening to this?" And I was like, "Oh no, don't listen to that. Like, you probably won't like it." And I mean, I don't usually encourage my friends like not to listen to shit, but I was just like, you know, I feel like he's not gonna like it, so I won't encourage him to. But he was like, "Oh, you know what? He said, yeah, I listened to one song, and I was like, oh, cool, like a wrestling reference, like, because he's a wrestling guy. He's like, oh, like a wrestling reference, cool, like I'll keep listening." And then he like about like 5 songs in, he just texted me, he's like, "I can't get into this," and I was like, I figured, but it was just he's like, I can't get past the guy's voice, but all these clips, I love all these wrestling clips and da da. And I'm like, So I we'll see how far they can go mainstream because I think they're like mainstream adjacent right now, but they're not there yet. But they're pretty well known, which surprises me just for the style of music that they make. Um, like I said, I think I have 3 albums in my top 10 so far from this year that are like, rap albums in that sense. And one of them is a lot less well known than the other two. So,
Well,
uh,
what are the other two? Now I have to ask. Well, we got Pray
well,
for Paris, so.
Pray for Paris was my 10, the Ka record was my 9, and the Freddie record was my 2. So I guess talk about, the Ka record, if you want to talk.
The thing is, I really like to talk about it, but I only heard it once, and I feel like I'm doing it a disservice. It's a great
Mm,
fucking album.
it's a great album.
It's incredible from the instrumentals, which are very, what you would expect from a Ka album. Although I feel like they're a little more developed than he gets credit for. They're still fairly minimal. The focus is still on the lyrics. The writing is incredible. It's just what I came up with because I was looking at the list earlier before the show to think about what I really wanted to focus on, and the Ka album came up. And I was thinking that Ka albums, for the most part, to me, are almost like Terrence Malick movies, where it's just like you got to be in a heavy headspace to like sit down and digest this shit.
Yeah, and if we're gonna go by that reference, and I think this album is Ka's the Thin Red Line because
Okay.
I think it's one of his top 2 albums, and I think it's the lyrics kind of center. I mean, it's even in the title in a sense, but like the lyrics to me kind of center around like it's very biblical, which actually I guess could be Tree of Life if we're because that's super biblical. So this is Ka's Tree of Life then, but his it's got that biblical feel, but also has like the feel of like Sins of Our Father with Rock. That one just feels. I mean, it's the only one with a feature, but at the same time, it feels like very tired and you know unwound by like the world around him. Like Ka is just he's fighting off these you know he's fighting off these things around him, and he's very worn down. But he's like I mean, Ka records are like poetry in a sense, where it's just taking his life experiences because he's literally like not a rapper in the sense that he's more of just like an actual citizen. Like he's not removed from all of the shit that goes on in the day to day. He lives his life in the trenches, like in the streets, and that's a common cliche in rap music. But for Ka, I think it really rings true because it translates to his albums. Like when you listen to this, it just feels like very lived in and very like stuff you could picture him writing down. I don't know if he writes, but you could picture him writing down in like a black book as he's like going throughout his days, and then eventually translating that into essentially, for my money, like poetry on record, poetry in audiobook form, because this is like the world's best audiobook. There's barely any beats, but it remains extremely compelling even despite that. And I agree with you. I have to be in a headspace when I listen to it. Like I don't bump this album a lot, but I've played it this year more than I thought I would. I will say that. I've listened to it about like 5-6 times in full at least, which is not something I expected from Ka's record, only just because they can be hard to get into. But to me, Ka's been on a really great run since Honor Killed the Samurai. I like his work before that. I know you got some other people like you love his work before that. But I think since Honor Killed the Samurai, he's connected with me a lot more. So he's a great rapper.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say that like the Dead End Hip Hop review for this was actually good. People should check it out. Mike Seatown had some good stuff about like the lyrics on this album and stuff. I'm not going to do it justice individually.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was afraid to talk about it, was because I only listened to it twice in full, once when it dropped, once a few days afterwards, and it's kind of evaporated from my memory. And I feel like for something with the level of writing that this has, that it would be doing it a disservice to not be able to cite specific lines, or if I was just reading off Genius, I don't have the songs fresh enough in my head to actively call them, up So I don't think that I would be. But in terms of what you said about his writing, from what I know about his past albums and how his process sounds to me, I feel like he's definitely a writer as opposed to just somebody who comes up with stuff in the booth. Like obviously Jay or Wayne would more be the examples of this. Probably more Jay than Wayne, because Wayne definitely comes across more free associative, whereas Jay like comes up, I feel like, with an idea in his head and then fleshes it out and is good at like just kind of unspooling the idea, as opposed to just coming across with more free association, just shit because it sounds good, sounds cool, sounds funny. With Ka, I feel like he has the idea from his like life experience, and then he comes out with a literary reference point to draw to extrapolate upon that idea. Like you had the Manchurian Candidate album, which the name's escaping me right now, Dr. Yen Lo, Preservation. That's actually probably my favorite of his, because I did a concept review of it on RYM that I wanted to do more about, so I listened to it a lot for the purposes of that review, probably more than I have any other Ka album, and I really gained an appreciation for the writing on it. And my other favorite is The Knight's Gambit, which is essentially, I think, the album that GZA has always wanted to make, that he most explicitly tried to make with Grandmasters, or at least at late period GZA has always tried to make, like from Beneath the Surface onward, with like extended metaphors and this whole wizened chess master persona. But I feel like GZA is more playing at being an intellectual, but really is a street guy playing an intellectual. But Ka is a street guy who is intellectual, and it just comes across. He's not playing at this. Like, he doesn't, like, I feel like a lot of when GZA tries to write at a quote-unquote elevated level, it's more affected, and the longer in his career he goes, the more affected it seems, the more forced his concepts seem. Whereas the fact that Ka's concepts don't feel like the actual experiences he's drawing upon are so relatable, so down to earth, that it gives a credibility to when he comes up with something literary like the chess metaphors or the samurai metaphor or the biblical metaphors. Like these big themes that he draws everything into, they don't feel forced. Like they feel natural. And I do feel like he gives a lot of I feel like he is a very careful writer in that way, to give just the right balance of his street experience with the literary content to make it more poetic, to hit on that poetic level that you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Ka, it just takes some getting used to. Like there's just some music I feel that you might not get at first listen. Like most of the music I really like on first listen, but there's just some stuff that you just have to sit with. And you know, it's harder these days when a million good things come out every month, but I think Ka is definitely someone that is worthy of that consideration. Like I feel like I don't know where his place is going to be when, like, you know, this when his career is all said and done, but I feel like he's going to be one of the more underappreciated, like just pure rappers and like wordsmiths of this era. You know, it's going to be a thing that some people will, you know, the wrong type of person will lament, like, oh, why don't we have more people like this? But instead of just, you know, saying that and trying to blame it all on, you know, a younger generation, just focus on the fact that you have a guy like Ka here, and there are others out there, you know, like him. So because Ka is still a pretty unique rapper anyway. Like there weren't a lot of people in like the '90s doing what Ka does. So I feel like and your GZA comp I think is a pretty cool comp, because I can see the similarities. I mean, even like going back to Sins of the Father, like, and some other tracks on here sound like tracks that could have been on fucking not quite Liquid Swords, but like that type of GZA record.
Well, he made his debut on a GZA record, Pro Tools.
Right.
And well, I don't know if that was his actual debut. I think he debuted significantly before that, but that was the first time anyone really checked for him, I think. I think that another comparison you could make, I don't know if this is reaching or not, just because of the similar monotone, I think there's actually a lot more character to Ka's voice, is Guru. But Guru is more of a conventional rapper. I think he's more Guru in his approach to rapping, and just that he's going to give it to you level and quiet. And in that way, he's probably a lot more similar to Master Killa in terms of the way he raps, in terms of a Wu comparison. But in terms of content, I feel like my GZA comparison holds. Like in terms of the way he writes.
I think that's actually I would agree that I think he's a modern day Guru. That's a really good comparison. Now I'm trying to think of Ka over the beats on Moment of Truth.
But again, Guru was coming at it from a more old school perspective, and you can't pick like Premier didn't make too many beats without drums, right? Like
True. Yeah.
so.
I mean, all those beats had drums and samples and what have you. So they were more, conventional.
I was just referring more to the way that Ka has this flat monotone that I feel like turns people off, which is a criticism you would hear of Guru a lot.
Oh, and the fact that his music is so quiet and like not in your face. You have to like you have to strain to hear it and all of that stuff. So and
it's
Guru,
it's unassertive, and I would
right?
think that
It's unassertive, but there's so much in there that, like I said, I need to be in a mood for. But when I am in the mood for it, you listen to it and you're like, damn, I feel like I just learned something by listening to this. Which is not usually a quality I want out of music, but I think in this case, there's an exception to that.
Well, an album that I would say I learned something from, at the very least, I think I learned a lot about the artists themselves and maybe a lot about their culture and their shared experience. And an album that I was anticipating for either a month or a decade, depending on how you count it, just came out this past weekend. I've only had a little bit of time to absorb it, but I've listened to it about 1.5 times in full. Blue in Exile, Miles. Have you heard any of this yet?
I have not heard it. I've heard it's really good. I know that this is like the Below the Heavens, like the real Below the Heavens follow up.
I don't want to cast any shade on Give Me My Flowers While I Can Still Smell Them, which was the actual Below the Heavens follow-up.
Yeah, right. And that was a good album.
But it disappointed a lot of people. Some of us bought the original unmastered version off Bandcamp for $15. And that was definitely underwhelming. Then they came out with a more mastered retail version on Fat Beats, I believe. And it was still good. Has one of Blue's very, very best songs, Seasons. But overall, it definitely was more morose than Below the Heavens. Like, Below the Heavens had morose themes to it. It was, like, a very emotional album, but I think was ultimately uplifting, whereas Give Me My Flowers was inspired by the deaths of both their grandparents, I believe. And, like, the title, it's very... That's like a saying about people who die. Like, you want to have your flowers while they can still smell them. Big Brother. Like, since we always talk about Kanye, that's a line on fucking Big Brother. But, I really like the album, but I can see why it was an unsatisfying follow-up. And, of course, Blue's career has been very frustrating for people to follow since, like, he's had his own personal issues, his own substance issues that he's admitted to, and his artistic output has been inconsistent at best. I will stand for New York as one of the best albums of the decade, but it had a very troubled rollout because he fought with his label. He tried to put it out himself for free, give out burned copies of it. And even then, like, it was not the album people wanted as a Below the Heavens follow-up again. It was about as far from it sonically as you can imagine. It was a very ahead of its time album, though. Like, it predicted Brain Feeder, it predicted so many of the electronic trends, and Blue's rapping on it is, I think, just as good, if not better, than it is on Below the Heavens. This is Blue rapping at or above that level with a sound that feels like Below the Heavens evolved 10 years in terms of what Exile can do. The instrumentation on it is so lush. The tracks are very long and drawn out, but aside from the Jacinto spoken word parts, which I could take or leave, they fit in, but they are a little tiresome and feel a little bit like padding. But still, that's like 5 minutes out of the album. It's still over 90 minutes even with them in there. I wouldn't really change a thing. It feels like a big prestige movie that is actually worthy of the prestige it's going for. Blue's performance on here is fucking remarkable. He has a song that's like a memorial for all the people he misses that have died, celebrities and such. That's like the best game song ever. The way he ties in all the names and makes them rhyme. It's like all name drops, but it actually works on a level that I didn't anticipate that it could. You Ain't Never Been Blue. Exile actually he raps on it. He raps well. If you've ever heard Exile rap before, that's an incredible compliment. Exile used to be like the most trash producer who rapped ever, and he raps pretty well on this. And it's just like a song about like people who don't understand what an everyday struggle is. And it feels very much like a follow-up to like the whole blue-collar worker personality that Blue was cultivating on Below the Heavens, which was the sort of... See, people... Again, back to Kanye. Like, people wanted, like, really hear Kanye for College Dropout, Late Registration, felt like it was speaking to the everyman rap. Like, that was, like, everyman rap, I guess. And then people wanted more of that. Kanye obviously became a superstar, so they looked for somebody like, I don't know, Rhyme Fest. Rhymefest didn't live up to it. He had an album called Blue Collar, but it wasn't that great. Like, Consequence had been around forever. He wasn't going to be that guy. Lupe was too nerdy. B.O.B. is fucking horrible. Like, there was everybody that, Charles Hamilton was going to do his own thing no matter what. Blue was in that class of rapper, and he was he was clearly skill-wise at the very top of that, and then he put out Below the Heavens, which was on a level that people wanted that to be their generation's Illmatic. And he, again, like, pretty much all of that class, and we should do something on that, because I think that most of them were the XXL freshman class. Maybe we should do an episode on that and where they all went, because that would follow up nicely with me doing the Charles Hamilton segment. Yeah, pretty much all those guys, like, and I think Wale and Cudi were in there too, were like supposed to be like the savior of rap at one point, like, the new Nas and or the new Kanye, in terms of, like, because Kanye went off and became a pop star essentially. Even if he was still putting out rap albums, he put out the one album that wasn't. People acted like it was fucking Dylan going electric, and in terms of being a personality, he, like, that's the reason we can't talk about his music anymore, is because around graduation he started outgrowing that. But my point, for the sake of this discussion, is that you lost that he wasn't going to ever put out a College Dropout again, where he put out songs about working at the Gap. So then you have songs about Blue, like, learning more about, like, he prefers riding the bus than having his own car because he learns more, and those type of songs. And this feels like that guy 15 years later looking back on his life and getting the most fully realized soundtrack for that. I felt like there were aspects of that in Blue's best releases in between. Like, there are songs on New York, like Above Crenshaw and Never Be the Same and Spring, Winter, Summer, Fall, that hit on those topics. And Good to Be Home is kind of Blue talking about his childhood and upbringing, but that had mixing issues, and that's a lot of people who aren't Blue rapping on that, so I can see why it didn't have the widespread appeal. This sonically is the progression of Below the Heavens, and rap-wise, you can't complain about the mixing on this one bit. You can hear every word Blue is saying. His writing is incredible. His rapping is remarkable. The only real criticism you can levy against it is that you don't want to hear somebody rap for 90 minutes. And even then, you get breaks for the instrumentals. Like, the instrumentals expand. The songs aren't just straight rapping throughout. I can't recommend this album highly enough. It's going to be very high on my year-end top 10. And the only honestly, the only reason I can't consciously put this at, like, number 1 or 2 on my list right now is that I don't realistically see myself spinning a 95-minute album that much.
Just because it's an undertaking.
Yes. So, and my album of the year has to be something that I play front to back all the fucking time. I play the best songs from this all the fucking time. Like, I'll play You Ain't Never Been Blue, Miles Davis, the Memorial song, which his name is escaping me right now, the last song, which is a posse cut that Blue comes back on at the end with one of the best verses I've ever heard from him. I can't recommend this highly enough. If you stop following Blue after Below the Heavens, you need to start following him again. This album's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm going to listen to it. I'm sure it's great. Blue's a great rapper. I haven't listened to Blue in a while. It's got to be at least, I don't know, a couple years. But yeah, I'm sure it's great. And good to know. I know there was some chatter around the release of it, but I did not get to it the other day when it came out. But yeah, we'll definitely check that this week, and I'm sure that I'll have, at the very least, similar thoughts to you.
So what do you have? Where do you want to go? Like, I feel like I kind of hogged the discussion, so I was wondering what you wanted.
No. I mean, look, there's a lot of great music that's been released this year. I mean, some that are in my top 10 that I'll run through real quick without talking about too much. But, like, I mentioned Boldy. Obviously, we talked about the Carly Rae record a lot already. The Fiona record's really good. Obviously, there's a million different rap records I could go to. Anywhere from Mike to, which might be in my top 10 at some point this year.
All right, I want to screech the podcast to a halt. What do we think about the Fantano Mike shit? I guess we have to address it.
I mean, it's obvious that he just doesn't like. It's interesting because he loves some rap songs. Once again, not the same thing, but before I heard Mike, all I had heard that sounded sort of like it was some rap songs, and then I listened to Mike because I got into Mike after that album. I only got into Mike like the last year or so.
Right. To say that Mike is ripping off Earl is categorically false. Like,
I agree. It's definitely its own thing. I think it's an easy transition from SRS, but I think it's its own thing. But with Fantano, he doesn't make the connection that lots of music can sound similar or of a headspace, because they literally are friends and hang out together, Earl and Mike. So it's like music can be similar in a burgeoning subgenre without anyone ripping off anyone else.
Well,
And
I guess
I don't think Fantano, either he doesn't make that connection or doesn't want to make that connection.
Well, I think Fantana is a very surface level thinker in a lot of ways, at least when it comes to hip hop. I have two things I want to bring up. Well, I guess one real thing I want to bring up is because this album is a very good album that I don't know if I'm ever going to listen to again, except for the Earl verse, which I've listened, or the Earl song, which I've listened to a few times. And I don't know if that's on him or me, because I don't know if it's because the subject matter is so dour, because I listen to plenty of lots of depressing shit.
Mm.
Excuse me. But I kind of feel like, and this is hypocritical because we just praised Griselda for doing the same thing over and over and honing it, because you could argue Mike is doing the same thing over and over and honing it. But I just get less and less interested. Like, Weight of the World feels a little like Tears of Joy, but lesser to me, but it's instrumentally, it's not. Rap-wise, it's the same. And then that feels a little less like more on my pen, but lesser, which I'm never going to be as excited by any of this as I was by God Bless Your Hustle, which predates some rap songs, by the way. And I guess, well, my points, I had 2 points, and I finally remember what the second point was. First of all, shout out to sometimes co-host Jermainson, who I know has kind of grown off this shit, and I'm going to take his side of the argument real quick, is that, do we think the sound is growing stale with the Slums guys? And I would say maybe except Standing on the Corner from this, because I feel like they do their own thing, but like Medhane and Navy Blue, who also put out an album this year that was very highly thought of, that I liked, that I'm not sure how often I'm going to listen to, because they're always so uniform and the emotional palette seems to be so very monochrome. Like, is it starting to play itself out a little bit? Is it starting to feel like they're a little lockstep? I don't know. I don't know if that I feel that way personally, but I know that I'm not playing the music as much as I play some rap songs or A Quiet Farewell, I don't know, or Red Burns, which I would say are probably the three best records to come out of it. The Medhane stuff I always really like when I listen to it, but I never play it twice.
You didn't like the I think Med's Loss is probably up there.
That's probably my favorite of his. I've played that one a few times. I will say that. And my second thing is, do we feel like some of the criticism of them could lapse into they're affecting their depression criticisms that Peep got, that we talked about a few weeks ago? Because so much of this music is based upon their depressed, alienated feelings.
Yeah, and I think for some, the initial, like, unless you're really in tune with the sound, because for me, I love the sound a lot. So I love the aesthetics of the record, not in that the depression, but I mean just the actual how it sounds, that I'm not tired of it yet. I'm nowhere near that point. However, because they've been doing this for about 3 years now, I could see how someone would be like, all right, like, this is good, but I'm just not going to listen to it, sort of thing. I don't know. I think Mike is the best of the group in terms of his discography, I think. I mean, is it Medhane or is it Madani? I don't know. Or Madani?
You should know by now that I'm not the one to ask how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't want to fuck it up.
I always say Medhane, but I haven't really had the opportunity to say it too much in actual conversation outside of the internet, so I wouldn't.
I don't know why I thought the H was silent. I think I watched a review that said that, but don't quote me on that. So I don't know. Regardless, I like his music. I liked his album from this year. I didn't love it, but I think as long as I continue to like things, I'm not going to be like, oh man, I wish they would change it up. Now, granted, it might not have the staying power, but remember, I only got into the majority of the Slums catalog this year, so we're at different points. Like, I was hella late. Yeah. So to me, a lot of this stuff still sounds fresh and new and pretty good. I mean, the Navy Blue album was good. Like, it wasn't great, but it was a good album, and I don't listen to it much, like you said, but it didn't have an effect for me. Like, I heard it, and I was like, oh, I want to listen to this again. My only contention is, like, there's so much good stuff that I just don't get the chance to listen to a lot of things again, unless the things are, like, in my top 30 or 40 of the year, and I absolutely love them. You know what I mean? It's that sort of thing.
If I had to make an analog or comparison for Navy Blue, it's like he is the God Fahim on downers, Like, he makes really good music, and he raps the same way every time over really great beats, and I have no desire to really listen to it more than twice, but he's the God Fahim without a Makami around. And I've probably listened to more full Fahim I mean, I have, because Fahim puts out a million projects. Shout out to the 5 or 6 God Fahim albums that I've rated 3.5 or 4 this year that I have not listened to twice. Still put out really good music, and I still don't listen to it more than once unless Makami's around. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Navy Blue. I'm still really excited for whatever Standing on the Corner does. Again,
Oh, absolutely.
Quiet Farewell is an incredible fucking album. I will not hear any slander against that. That was an example of Fantano getting it right, and then dumb backlash on RYM because, God forbid, we like the same thing Anthony Fantano likes. I just wish we could judge music without caring what Anthony Fantano likes one way or another. Just some guy.
Because you're kind of with RYM, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know, if Fantano doesn't like something, you know, odds are it's usually a pretty good album that he doesn't like, and then we're like, oh fuck, here comes the rating downvotes. But then if he does like something, then you got to get all the people that like, you know, are the cool kids who are like, no, now I can't like it.
Right, and I really brought him up just to get into the discussion about whether or not Slums is getting stale, and or whether or not they've like aestheticized their depression, or if that's the criticism of them, or if that's what's burning people out on
Yeah,
them.
I don't think they're stale yet. I think it's funny that Diction calls them zombie hop. I don't think they're
I still love that. That's like the funniest thing he's ever come up with. But
I don't think they're stale yet. I mean, we'll see. You know, if they start putting out bad, then you know, then we'll see.